I am here with One Life to Live alum David Gregory, who played Ford on the show, and who also just recently was with former soap star Lacey Chabert in a in a little rom-com commercial type thing. So, how have you been since One Life to Live has ended? Like, what's been going on? It's been so long already. I can't believe it.
I've been doing well, thanks, Brian, for asking. You know what's funny? I have a niece that was born in October of 2011. The soap, at least for us, we stopped shooting episodes in November of 2011.
Hmm.
And so whenever I see her, she's representative of the time that has elapsed. And they're doing construction outside my door. I don't know what's going on over there. So I just saw her, and she's a teenager now. She's like, it's weird to see that time elapse, like in terms of her life. And I don't feel like I'm that much older, but it's. I ran into some guys on the writing team recently, and I just thought, oh, last time I saw you, I felt like I was maybe a kid, and now I feel like I'm an adult. You know what I'm saying? And there's good, and there's maybe not so good that goes with that. I feel
Yeah.
like,
We've been through a lot too, so
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
definitely going to mature you, or not mature you, but like, make you feel like an
Ab-
older person.
absolutely.
So, we've talked many times. We've always
Hmm.
talked about, how your body of work
Mm,
in front and like how it wasn't a fair representation of your talent all the time. Uh,
mm,
Now that you're older, have you been able to kind of like thwart those kind of roles and
mm.
really go through with your talent?
It's a good question. I think it's a double-edged sword because I've had people say, well, if you want to work, you need to remain doing the things that got you the work in the first place. And I still go to the gym every day. I still keep in shape, but I didn't want to have that be the defining factor in what I was doing. I actually got reached out to last year by this gentleman who was wanting to put together a short film about escorts.
Hmm.
And he wrote this beautiful script. It was so perfect and it was so like such a page turner. And he's like, I'm really interested in you playing this part. And to his credit, the writing was great. So that's kind of my litmus test of what I want to do is the writing good? But I just couldn't rationalize being fully naked on camera.
Hmm.
And I told him that I said it's not that you're not a good writer, it's that I don't know if I'm in the headspace to do these kinds of roles right now. And could I have done it? Yes, but I think that it was going to be more of going down the same path of defining myself in a certain way that I really want to make sure that I turn that ship and at least am seen for other things because there's also the stereotype of this is going to be a very broad statement, so forgive me. But if you keep your clothes on, you're playing a smart person, and if you take them
Right.
off, you're playing a dumb person. You know what I'm saying? And so, like the roles, it's this play I'm about to go do with John Ship. It's
Yeah.
he's a smart lawyer, and I've never played that before, and I'm excited to. And so I actually, before we got on this call, I jumped back into your book again.
Oh,
I don't know if you can
nice.
see this.
It's blocking it
um,
out.
there
Thank
we
you.
go, your book.
There you
Um,
go.
uh, which is great. But I was reading through other people's stuff, and then I kind of flipped through the things that I wrote that I'd kind of forgotten about, and this was a big point of our conversation, this particular topic. And I'm so glad you always ask and you always give time and space for that. But I think obviously as a man, my struggles with it are never going to be as great as what women are dealing with, and it's just the business can be very cruel.
For sure.
But
Yeah, it doesn't doesn't lessen, what you may have felt as well.
sure, I appreciate that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So are you keeping in touch with anybody that you worked with on the show?
Yes, I am. Well, I'm sure we'll get to this, but John and I are about to go to this play. John, who played my dad. Uh, I'm very, very close with my brothers, Nick Roebuck, who played James, and Lenny, who played Nate. Um, we're very close. I think I wish I was closer to Nick just in proximity because he lives on the West Coast. But every time he comes into town, I see him. Um, and I've got to see his little son grow up. His son is 8 years old now. It's incredible.
Wow.
And Lenny's been through a lot the last couple of years too, so we've sort of bonded in that. And now we're guys coming into our 40s, and it's really great. I think it's really important to stay in touch because you do kind of become a witness to each other's lives. We've all
Yeah.
gotten married since. We've all become um, a lot closer through the tragedies and the triumphs in our lives. And I think that that's important. I mean, I can speak to those for myself. I don't want to give away things that they may not want to talk about. But
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Brittany Underwood, Kristen Alderson, Bree, um, uh, yeah, and people behind the scenes too. I've stayed in touch with a lot of people, and it sounds cliche because people talk about it being a family, but because it's a show that's in people's homes 5 days a week instead of just once, like a primetime show, there is
Right.
something that sort of bonds you together for what I'm hoping is the rest of my life.
Yeah. I know we are speaking for a soap publication or
Yeah.
website now. They don't have publications anymore because
Yeah.
2025, whatever year we're in. Um, so there are only four soaps left. Oh no, now there's five Beyond the
Now
Gate.
there's five. That's right.
Yeah, now there's five that just premiered last week. Have you had any interest in returning to your daytime roots? Have you thought about moving to California since they're all there?
I definitely have had interest. There was a point I think a couple years ago where I was in the running for something on Young and the Restless. I don't remember who it was, and the only reason why maybe that's not important is that it was enough that they reached out to my agent and they were asking about, would I be interested in this position after I'd auditioned, and then I was told everything was like great, sounds good, and then I was told that they ended up cutting the part, and that could be, you know how it goes. Sometimes they want to
Mhm.
focus more on the storylines that they already have, or maybe they were just being nice and saying, well, we've decided not to go with him. But from what I understand, the part was never cast. um, and that was the last time I really was like, is this something I would do? And the answer is, of course, yes. You want to work, you want to have, because One Life was such a great family. I'm assuming Young and the Restless would be very, very similar.
Right.
um, I don't know if I would make the move to Los Angeles without the prospect of work. And the reason is just it would just cost a lot of money to make that
Right.
leap. I went out to LA to shoot that commercial with Lacey Chabert over the Christmas holiday and forgot how much I mean, who doesn't love the weather? This was like 2 weeks before the fires.
Mm.
And, they've been ransacked with certain kinds of weather since. And it is a lovely place to live and it's a lovely place to be. I just can't get over the crushing devastation. If people decide, yeah, I'm gonna stay in LA, I'm gonna make my life here, and also presumably you're in the film or television industry, if you do decide to do that, a lot of people don't have the resources to bounce back, because they haven't worked in a while or whatever. So um, I'm just here to correct the narrative that it's not just actors and rich people that live in LA. There's, you know,
Or people and actors.
Yeah, I mean
Or
that's
actors,
what I'm
right?
saying. I mean, there's points where thought I was going to live out of my car while I lived there. So that's the other thing is you in New York you don't have to pay for a car and have the insurance on that. So there are checks and balances to both coasts, I think.
Mhm.
But I wouldn't kick it out of bed, that's for sure.
And Frank's still running General Hospital, so you
That's
have that.
right. That's right. And well, now we have Beyond the Gates on the East Coast. We have it in Atlanta.
Oh,
So
Atlanta. Yeah, that's closer.
yeah, I
There
would
you go.
I'd for sure do it.
That's awesome. What kind of projects have you been doing since, well, it's been so many years. I mean, I know you
Mm.
had your original play performed also with John Wesley Shipp, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. John and I did a workshop of my play. It's called Hank and Jim Build a Plane about Henry Fonda and Jimmy Stewart. Did it down in New Orleans in 2019. Now, it's since being developed. It was at the time a two-person play. Now it's a six-person multi-character two-act epic. And
Okay.
the reason why it's turned into something different is because the producers here in New York that are working on it have hired John Rando. He's a Tony Award-winning director to direct it.
Mhm.
So we're in the process of redeveloping it for a larger scale right now. And I just turned a new draft into them just before Thanksgiving, and so we're supposed to have a Zoom meeting about it very soon. And the reason why that's tricky is because John is working overseas at the moment, so there's a time change or a time zone issue. Um, but we're moving and shaking on it, and I say that, people have asked me like, oh, you're not acting anymore, and I'm like, well, no, but that's not the case. If my phone's not ringing, I want to make sure that I have like some irons in the fire, and I'm very, very passionate about this play. John played Henry Fonda in a workshop production and a reading of it. He's the one that brought it to the producers. He's an integral piece of why this play is moving forward. John also did the audio drama that I wrote that's on currently on YouTube, and so he and I have been orbiting each other for a long time. And I think kind of to what I was saying before is like as an actor, you're just kind of looking to say good words with good people. People ask me what my dream role is. I don't know if I have a dream role. I just want to have good scripts and be able to like work on them with good people. And it sounds so simple, but it's not always that case. And that also means doing more plays simply because plays have had more time to gestate and
Right.
become better. I mean, I think we're certainly in a golden era of television and there's prestige films and stuff, but you sort of have to be higher up on the ladder to get those jobs in the first place.
Right.
And so that's why I'm going off to do a play in North Carolina with John because we got the chance to do it.
Absolutely. You're working. Is there any chance that it might come up here and run here in
I
New York?
don't
Well,
think so. But stranger things have happened. I know that Morgan Sills, who's the executive director of the theater down there, he splits his time between New York and here, and he produces a lot off Broadway. This play, the Caine Mutiny Court-Martial, is not done often, and the reason why it's not done often is because it's a very dense, very technical play. It's the whole story takes place in the courtroom where the audience gets to piece together the events of the case without seeing the events of the case. Whereas the 1954-55 movie with Humphrey Bogart shows the entire arc of them being on the ship and then the event, the mutiny happening, and then moving into the courtroom. So um, it's a difficult play to execute. We only have like 10 days of rehearsal and then we go into a weekend of performances. My hope is that we could run longer somewhere.
yeah.
Um, but that's also contingent on John's schedule, all those things. But from what I understand, this particular company excels at bringing in these stars like John, doing a
Mhm.
very quick run of a play. We do like a school performance because kids have gotten some material that will help them learn in school. When John had done, I think it was 12 Angry Men down there in 2016, these kids all had a copy of the Constitution. They were able to pinpoint what pieces of the Constitution were affected by this parts of the play. So I'm assuming there'll be lots of that as well. It's kind of cool to see the educational aspects of things like this too, because I was one of those kids once that had never seen a play before and was like, oh, this is what theater can be. I had no
Right.
idea. Um, I'm
And
going off on a
played on
trail. It's
Broadway,
not.
right?
It did. It was on Broadway. I
David
think in
Schwimmer?
the. Pardon me.
Wasn't David Schwimmer in it when it was on
David
Broadway?
Schwimmer played the role that I'm
Yeah.
playing, Lieutenant Greenwald, and then it was originated on Broadway in the '50s, and Henry Fonda played the same part. It's a great part.
Yeah. Now, kind of jumping back to One Life to Live and John, you guys played father and son. How long did it take you guys to get into a groove? John's character was quite abusive, uh, and Ford was, kind of like the sweetheart kind of guy. Like
Sure.
everybody wanted to be him. They all wanted to look
Right.
like him. He was just a good guy. So, how long did it take you guys to like bond and make that so watchable?
Thank you. We figured out pretty quick that even though Bobby was a sweetheart,
Mhm.
that he initially started out as sort of this womanizing guy, that he was the son who was the echo of his father.
Hmm.
And one of my favorite things about working with John was that we sat and like we sort of did what stage actors would call like table work on these scenes. There was no taking breaks. We just were so excited, and so because we like would kind of jump on each other's lines and finish each other's sentences, and there was a lot to be said for this is the echo of John would be like, this son is the echo of my life.
Mhm.
And as my character trying to turn over a new leaf, it was a lot of I have to resist with everything I have to not become you. So we had a blast. I think kindred spirits just recognize each other, and that's again why he and I have continued to work. We did the audio western 10 years ago this month. We recorded 10 years ago in February. We recorded it. So there's a lot to be said for I gotta keep working with that person because I can't let whatever that is go.
Mhm.
And to his credit, he's the person who got me on this play in North Carolina. And he won't like me saying this, but this is the truth. He was supposed to do this production of 12 Angry Men up in Connecticut 2 years ago, and he ended up having to bow out, and he recommended me for the job.
Hmm.
And when there's an understanding and a relationship there, uh, I say this to say that I hope I'm in a position someday to be able to do that for somebody else because he's done that for me. But there's something about once you find that kindred spirit, the way you work, the way you operate, the way you think.
Yes.
You kind of just have to stay in each other's orbit as long as you can.
I completely get that actually. Going through a little bit of that myself.
Yeah.
So where were there any things you would have done differently on One Life in terms of your character,
Mm.
uh, besides him not getting killed off? I mean, I would think that would probably be your top choice. But would
Well,
you have liked to have been seen in a different way and had some, more meaty, dramatic stuff?
that's a really good question. And especially hindsight is always 2020.
Of course.
I will say for myself is that there was a lot that I didn't know how to do when I
Mm,
was on the show.
mhm,
I was still learning a lot, and I'm still learning, but I think the inevitable track that happens to every human on the planet is that life kicks you around a little bit.
yeah.
And you go from being, as an actor, you'll go from being in a place where you have to work at something where you don't even have to draw from it anymore. It just comes up.
Mhm,
And I think when I see clips from the show, I see a young man who's coming into adulthood.
mhm,
And so I could say now with my almost 40-year-old self, well, I wish I had a chance to do this, this, and this, but I didn't have the capacity for it.
right.
I remember approaching scripts, and my first thought is, how would someone else play this scene? So I had like a thing in my head, like I'm a
Mhm,
big Jack Lemmon fan, so I'd say, well, how would Jack Lemmon approach this scene? Well, that sort of becomes inauthentic over time because you're playing it in a version of your head of how you think somebody else would do it. Whereas now, all you have to do really is listen to what's said to you and respond. And
mhm,
it sounds so simple, but actors get very in their head about it because they think they have to do things.
right.
But what we forget is what's more interesting is just how you would naturally respond.
Mhm,
We're doing it right now. So it's a really good question. I've never been asked that question. And I think I would love to say, well, I wish I got to do, you know, soliloquies in a garden. Who cares? Like, but the fact of the matter is, I don't know if I was capable. And I think um, life has changed me. And I think maybe that would probably affect how I would approach it if I did it in the future in a positive way.
And for those who don't know, and obviously you share as much as you're comfortable with, you
Mm,
did lose your father not too long ago.
hmm
Is that part of the major, obviously, was part of the major life change? What what differences do you see in yourself um, in that whole journey with your
mm,
father's disease, going from, one stage and then eventually
hmm
passing? Like, how do you feel you matured in each journey of that? Because that's a
mm.
very hard thing to go through, and it was prolonged.
Yeah. So to fill in the gaps of that, my dad got diagnosed with Alzheimer's when he was 58, like around 2013.
Mhm,
And then it was like a 10-year process of losing him until he passed away November of 2023. So I guess the first and foremost, everybody, I think the inevitable thing is that you're going to lose a parent.
mhm,
It's not always a guarantee that you'll be close with that parent. And you're very lucky if that parent is like your champion.
right.
So I have an understanding that the loss that I'm experiencing, I'm very lucky to have because it's so magnificent. Um, During this process, even if we put the pandemic aside,
Mhm,
my wife's mother got sick and she passed away suddenly. We put my dad in a nursing home. Then my father passed away. So there was a lot in the last, I would say, let's say 5 years, this 5 year mark of 2020 to 2025 that changes you.
yeah.
And it like it brings gravity into your life and it pulls you closer to the earth. And I sometimes I'm reluctant to speak so much about it because I tend to speak in terms like this isn't happening to anybody else, it's only happening to me. But the truth is, we all have a very shared experience, and if we're
Absolutely.
lucky, that experience is is tough because we loved that person.
Right.
That makes me what it's done to me is sometimes the broad stroke is I'll get an audition for something and I'll think in my head first, what is this for? What am I doing on the earth, right? If time is so precious, then what am I spending my time doing?
Mhm,
Which kind of goes back to the other thing of like I just want to say good words with good people, but it makes I think this is I've heard interviews with famous actors like James Marsden. He says the older I get, the more I'm thinking I really, if my kids are so important, my family's important, I really want to make sure that what I do spend my time doing is important so that I can justify not spending time with my family. But for me, um, it I want to make a crack in the earth,
Yeah,
right? I want to do something that's important. And that's because I feel like I have all this to offer because I've experienced this loss.
absolutely.
Why not turn that loss into something that is could help somebody else?
Yeah. I believe Andrew Garfield said something really beautiful
Yes,
on it was something about tears are just unexpressed or
and
emotion that you're not going to be able to express to the person when
that's
you're
right.
here. And I
That's
thought
right.
that was as somebody who lost, my father, my brother as well. It was
Yeah,
the very it's that really hit because it's
yeah.
exactly what it is. Do you find that writing is more cathartic to you than the acting has become?
Mm.
Or has it
I
become? Sorry, that was like,
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I think both do different things for you. Like writing for me is also like an acting exercise because I can write a monologue. For instance, in this Henry Fonda Jimmy Stewart play, there's a monologue that I wrote for a character called Jane Fonda.
Mhm.
I don't have her life experiences, but we have similar crossovers with our parents. So I can sort of put on my actor hat and think, well, what would she say in this situation? But I'm never going to be able to be asked to perform that. So I will never have that cathartic experience of flipping that switch.
Right.
I do think there's a really beautiful monologue. This is going to sound so strange, but there's a beautiful monologue in a Jerry Lewis movie called The Errand Boy,
Mm.
where at the end of the movie, these studio executives are watching their quote new discovery in
Mhm.
Jerry Lewis playing a version of himself on screen, and he's brilliant. And this one guy is a studio executive. He remarks how not everybody is capable of expressing for the millions that either can't, don't know how, or never get the opportunity to do so.
Mm.
And I've come to realize in the ensuing years since all these tragedies that everybody has these feelings, but not everybody's capable of expressing them. And so they look to people in the arts almost as representatives of a soul
Right.
to say, "Can you do this for me? Can you show us what we're supposed to look like?" We do that a lot. That's why we go to the movies. That's why we turn on our TV. I mean, this is
Mhm.
a very deep definition of it.
Yeah.
But for me, that's why I do it. It's because I feel like I'm called to be a representative of somebody that may not be able to do that in the first place.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about how you're kind of an old soul, but
Yeah, yeah.
you're also a kind soul, and it's just
Thank
like
you.
so it's so exciting to see you mounting this play and talk a little bit about your character and like what's it been like working with John again?
It's been great. It's almost like going home. And John has been through the loss of his parents during this time as well. And I don't want to speak too much to that, except to say that it's weird to go through a similar experience with someone who's in a different part of their life. Like I think he just turned, I don't want to say it, but a big birthday for him. And he's uh so we weirdly have bonded over that. And it's interesting because I saw him the other day. We were doing some kind of press thing over Zoom, and I came over. He was sitting down, like putting on his socks, and I came over and I like hugged him from the side and like rub, rubbed his back, and I was like, I feel our relationship shifting over time,
Yeah,
because I do feel there's a familial aspect to how we interact,
yeah,
and same thing with his partner JC. I sat there and I spoke with him for like 3 hours after, and it felt like we were family, and it's a different kind of comfort that I haven't experienced in a while. And anyway, I feel that with you when I talk to you. It doesn't feel like we're doing an interview. It feels like
right. Thank you.
it feels safe and it feels like it's easy.
Yeah.
Um, to that end, I reached out to John because this part is sort of monumental, and he doesn't shut up. So I said to John, I said, so John has two major scenes in the play because he's one of the star witnesses. And he comes on in the first act and does this smaller scene, and he comes on the second act, and it's this basically 20-minute scene between he and I where the defense is really going after him. And I said, would you do me a favor? Would you just, anytime you want, let me know when I can come over and we'll just read through the scene over and over in the month of March because I have all this other stuff to learn. I think the only way I can learn our stuff is to literally do it with you.
Yeah.
And of course he says yes. Of course he does. And I had a conversation with Daniel Haley, our director, on the phone, who I've not met, but just introduced I called him up and said, "Can I, introduce myself so we're not starting from scratch on day one?" And I said, since we're working so quickly, once we get down to North Carolina, um, are you okay if John and I meet and sort of create a shorthand and get that under our belts? I don't want to skirt around a director's direction, but maybe that would help. And he goes, oh, absolutely. I think the more prepared you come down when we're down there, the better. And so um, that's kind of where I'm approaching it. You know, when you work on a soap, you have to learn something so fast. And I don't think any soap director or writer would mind me saying this. You don't have to be word perfect. You kind of, if you get it, you get it.
Right.
But with plays, it's a very different story, and the word is all. So you have to have it under your belt as written, both from a legal standpoint and from a respect for the writer's standpoint. And I want to be clear: it's not that you don't respect writers in the other mediums. It's just the play. The word is the point. That's why there's no close-ups, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it's been great, and I think because John and I do have a shorthand when we work, and now we've worked in different meetings. We've worked in television, we've worked in audio, and now we're doing a play together. There's really not that much of a difference.
Right.
Um, but in the scene he and I are supposed to be intimidating each other. And
Yeah.
we haven't had a chance to do that since we've done the soap, where
Right.
we really like go after each other. I will never forget this. We were recording the final episode of the audio Western Powder Burns. And throughout the arc of the 7 episodes, I play the deputy, he plays the sheriff, and throughout the arc, we sort of fall away from each other and we argue a lot and
Mhm.
we sort of disrespect each other. And then in the last episode, it becomes clear that we are all we have left.
Mm.
And we were doing this one scene where, he's a blind sheriff, he's literally helpless, and I'm sort of helping him get off the ground because he's fallen or something. And I ask him, well, what do you need? And he goes, I need you to help me because I'm about to run for sheriff. Basically, I'm about to run again. I'm going to double down to fight this bad guy in town, basically. But while we were recording it, he grabbed my hand, and it surprised me.
Mm.
And this is an audio recording, obviously, so it's not seen. But I went back and we went through the different takes, and you can hear a difference in him speaking when he
Mm.
grabs my hand, and you can hear my response. And I'm not, it's a very subtle thing, but what I'm saying is that there's a commitment to do the most real version. There's no acting at a certain point. Do you know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think when you can strip all that away, that's what people really want to see. And it's a very vulnerable position to be in. And this goes to your question from before. I used to be afraid of that as an actor, and I'm not afraid anymore. I used to be afraid of revealing that. What are people going to think? Who cares?
Yeah.
Because that's what people do. That's how they are.
Right.
Um,
I love that you
yeah.
mentioned subtlety because I think people, I mean, at least when I watch things, I obviously can't speak for every other person on the planet, but
Mm,
little subtle things like that are the things I
mm,
notice more than the big moments because that's where the
totally.
connection happens between the actors and between the audience.
I could not agree more. I
Yeah.
totally agree.
So the play is running in April, correct?
April 24th through the 27th at I believe it's the Owens Auditorium
Okay.
in Pinehurst, North Carolina.
Very cool. And we will link where you can get tickets. And
Yes.
everybody who's in North Carolina, and hey, if you're in the surrounding states and you can get down there, go check this play out. David it's been a long ride for you, and we've had a
You
long
too,
ride
pal.
together. Yeah,
Yeah, you
and
too.
it's nice to be able to connect again and see you being able to be in the acting space, but also
Thank
in the
you.
writing space. So it's a beautiful thing. And
I
I'm
appreciate
so
that.
grateful we were able to catch up.
Me too. Thanks, pal. I appreciate it.